Welcome to the Smart Legacy Podcast, your resource for protecting assets and securing your future. Hosted by Stockton and Kandt, join us as we cover essential estate planning and elder law topics, such as wills, trusts, and Medicaid planning. Stockton and Kandt, your trusted attorney advisors in safeguarding what matters most. All right, guys, welcome to our first and kickoff episode of the Smart Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Stockton. I'm the managing attorney for the firm of Stockton Kandt, located here in the Kansas City metro area. We've got an office over in Corporate Woods in Overland Park, and our other office is down in the southern part of the metro area in Gardner. With me here today, I have partner attorney Sophia Kandt, who also happens to be my daughter. So, Sophia, welcome, and you'll introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, so as he said, I'm Sophia Kandt, one of the partner attorneys with the firm. I do estate planning, elder law. I'm the Medicaid attorney here at the firm. And I'm the Kandt. So I used to be the Stockton. I've grown up in the firm. And we're excited to be here today.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that today as we go in. But I just wanted to kind of introduce this, as this is our first inaugural episode of the podcast, to say, what are we doing here? So we're going to be talking about estate planning, elder law, wills, trusts, the things that are important. And we want it to be relevant, to give you the information that you need to make sure that you're planning appropriately for your family. So each episode, we're going to be covering these topics. So tune in. You'll find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, as well as Spotify. And so we would just encourage you to subscribe and share, and you'll find these coming out on a bi-monthly basis, so twice a month, with new content that we hope is relevant to you as the subscriber and listener. So, Sophia, let's kick off with this. So this year represents our 25th anniversary as a firm, and you've been along for the whole 25 years.
I have been.
And so, as I said, Sophia is my daughter, and so when we started the firm, it was May 1st of 2000, which actually, as it turned out, it wasn't intentional, but May 1st of each year is Law Day. And so we happened to start on May 1st of 2000 and opened up our office. We were in the basement of the First Kansas Bank and Trust building in Gardner, Kansas. And started off, and it was just me, and your mom would come in in the afternoons when you kids were all in school, because I think your youngest brother was just in kindergarten at that point, and she would come in and help me out. But you often found yourself in being put to work
I like
as
to
a
say
young child.
I was the first employee of the law office. So, I used to come in there, and you used to put me to work and filing documents, and I don't know if I actually did anything helpful. I probably messed up the paperwork more than helped. But, I that's what I like to say is I was there from the start. It really was. Yeah, I remember
some of the early days, we would have, as your kids would come in, and we'd have rubber band wars, rolling chairs around us, rolling forts, and we had a lot of fun. But we did a lot of work there. So you've been in, and I think you decided at a very young age that you wanted to kind of follow in the footsteps and join me in the firm.
Yeah, I mean, as a young child, you're always thinking, what are you going to be when you grow up? And, people are saying astronaut and all these things. And I was going to be a WNBA player. But I also said an attorney. I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I saw you go through law school and become an attorney. And I just watched that my whole life thinking that that's what I want to do. And here I am.
Yeah, because you grew up playing basketball, played basketball in college. I can remember as a young child, I was going to play baseball. That was my
that
dream.
didn't work out, but it was for the best.
Oh, you had a great basketball career. So, so you've joined the firm. And we are an estate planning and elder law firm. And I always say as we go back, and because that was not my intent in the very beginning. That was not my plan before I got to law school. I had planned that I was going to go into international law. I was very interested in monetary policy. I had studied economics as a undergraduate, and then I'd studied in a graduate program. I was studying monetary policy in Edinburgh, Scotland, as Europe was looking to go to a single currency, to what is now the euro. And they were having the early discussions and treaties and stuff being signed to start moving that way. And I was there at the early set and studying that under the tutelage of Professor Andrew Scott, who was also the co-editor of the Journal of Common Market Studies. And so I got to be involved in that and thought that's what I was going to pursue. But there was an event that happened in our family that impacted that.
Yeah. Why don't you share a little bit about it? I know that I've heard this story through the years, and it's been very impactful to even me this day, or to this day. And it's something I like to share with clients that I meet with. And I know it's impacted a lot of people in the family. So yeah, why don't you share that story?
Yeah, because it did. So my grandparents lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and my mom was an only child. I was just finishing up my undergraduate work, thinking I'm going to go to law school and pursue a career in international law. But my grandparents in Louisville, Kentucky, my grandfather was in poor shape from a health standpoint, and my grandmother was in good health, and we all believed she would outlive him, except that's not the way it worked out. She didn't wake up one morning. We went to the funeral, to my grandmother's funeral, and my mom stayed behind after the funeral. She was trying to convince my grandfather to move back to Kansas so she could help look after him. He needed help. He couldn't live on his own. But he did not want to leave his home. So your grandma, my mom, stayed behind and interviewed home care workers and that to come in and care for him. And then she came back home. And 6 months later, we got a call from my grandfather, and he'd gotten remarried. And guess who he married? Mm-hmm. Yep. It was a home care worker who was actually younger than my mom.
It's a big surprise to everybody in the family. No one expected that.
And then 3 months after that, he himself passed away. So he died within 9 months of my grandmother, but he'd already remarried in that time frame. And everything ended up going to this new spouse. When we went back to my grandfather's funeral, my grandparents had not been planners, but my grandfather had gone ahead and planned his funeral when he, paid for my grandmother's, had paid and planned his, or at least paid for it. So we're back to the same funeral home we'd been at 9 months earlier, and now we're there for my grandfather's funeral. And when we got there, the funeral director greeted us at the door as we came across the parking lot. We were there early. And he talked to us, and then he let us know that, look, you guys are not welcome back in the family room. You're Mrs. Reiner, my new grandmother, has made clear you're not welcome back in the family room. You're going to need to sit out here in the chapel. Okay, fine. So we sat in the chapel because grandmother's funeral, we'd been back there, a little family room off the chapel that we'd sat in. So we're out in the chapel. At the end of the funeral, have no idea who the pallbearers were. It wasn't any of us. We were still at the funeral home. We had not made our way to the cemetery, and the new wife came to me. I don't think she wanted to face your grandmother. Mm-hmm. She came to me, and she said, look, you guys are not welcome at the home. However, I do have a few things I want your mom to have, and so if you'll give me about an hour after we leave the cemetery, I'll put them out on the end of the driveway for your mom. So after we left the cemetery, we went to lunch with some extended family, and then we made our way to my grandparents' house, and sure enough, out on the end of the driveway was a box. It had a picture frame, my grandmother's Bible, a few knickknacks in it. That was it. We had talked at lunch. It was pretty clear that my mom was not going to get anything of value, that was all going to her. But we had hoped to get the Bible. It had been handed down, through some generations, and we hoped to get that. And we also hoped to get the photo albums. My grandparents had kept photo albums under the coffee table, and it was my mom growing up and us grandkids, just family. And we thought, what interest would she have in those? And we knew my mom wasn't getting anything of value, but we hoped to get those two things. We had the Bible, but we didn't have the photo albums. So I went up and knocked on the door. She wouldn't answer. Pretty sure she was home. The box is out on the end of the driveway, and I'd seen at the funeral that she was driving my grandmother's car, and it's sitting right there in the driveway. But she wouldn't answer the door. And this was the days before cell phones, so we had to drive to a payphone, and we drove down to a payphone. I was the one who called, and I called a couple times. She finally answered, and I said, Brenda, all we want are the photo albums. She just hung up. We never got them. My mom talked to several attorneys there in the Louisville area who all told her basically the same thing, that she knew what she was doing. And my mom really didn't have any standing on this. There were several things that factored into that. But here I was just getting ready to leave for this year abroad in Scotland and then come back and start law school. And when I started law school, I still had this plan that I wanted to go into international law. But the first chance that I got to take electives, I had 2 classes that semester, international law and wills and trust. And I took the class in wills and trust because I was really, I thought, well, this is good stuff to know for my own family. But I was very interested, like, how did she end up getting everything? But I also took international law because that's what I wanted to do as a career. But what I found is my passion was not in international law like I thought it was going to be. My passion was in wills and trusts, and I took other classes. And so it's influenced me as to why I became an estate planning attorney. And so it just factored in, and I think each of us probably have things that influence life, but that was kind of mine that set me down this path, and then you've come along and the path as well.
Right. And I've seen, I've heard the story over the years, and I think I was probably too young. Was I even alive?
You were alive, but you were very young.
Alive.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that, hearing that story, that impacted me, and I think where I kind of led, and I'm really, we also do elder law as well, and where I've really fit into this is that, in high school, I worked as a nursing student, and I worked in some nursing homes throughout the years and through college and through high school as well. And I saw firsthand the impact that living in a nursing home had on the people and had on families. And, it pulled on my heartstrings. And so, growing up, seeing, I went to law school knowing that I was going to do estate planning, and I took all the estate planning classes, and I really loved that. And so having that, part of elder law as well, I think, really sets us apart, that, we're talking about the things that really matter. So.
Yeah, it really is. And so when we set up, because growing up, my mom she worked as a activity director. So she'd been in nursing, but for a good portion of her career, she was activity director for a nursing home in Emporia, Kansas, where I grew up. And she would drag us kids in there. So I spent a lot of time in there too. So those are the things influenced me. So when we started the firm, specifically, I guess I started the firm.
Yeah,
you were helping me, and Mom. But I had this concept that estate planning that should be different than how I saw it being implemented. Most people, and I think today this is still true, most attorneys, unfortunately, they view estate planning as if it's a transaction, if it's all about the documents, right? You go in to see the attorney to have your will drafted, your trust drafted, to do the estate plan, and it's all about the documents. And what I had this idea that that's not what it's about. It's not about the documents. Certainly the documents are important, but it's really, we want certain outcomes. We don't want to be a burden. We want our family in harmony. We don't want them arguing and fighting things. We want to make sure we have a plan for long-term care so the government doesn't come in and put liens on property or take the property. We want to protect assets. And what I discovered was, and kind of had an idea, that I think it has as much or more to do with our values as it does our valuables. But I felt like that was being missed in all this, that people weren't really thinking through, how does this work when we get to the end game and we need these things? And so we just did the estate planning a little bit different. We tell people when you're doing this planning, don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple. Simple plan is usually the best plan. But at the same time, you have to be comprehensive.
Yeah, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I think a lot of people, when they say, it's just a box they have to check. I've got to do estate planning. And they'll, go online and get one of those free wills online or cheap wills online, or go, down to the bank if they offer a will, and they get those. And when they're planning it, they're not thinking through what's going to happen in the future. They're not really thinking those things through. It's just, again, one of those boxes to check. And it's what we've seen through these stories and everything that we've seen with our clients happen. It's not a box to check. It's something that everything is changing. You have to be comprehensive.
Yeah, you've got to be comprehensive in the planning. And yeah, I tell people if they view it, no, it's just about the documents or about press, go online and do this stuff. If that's what you want, you don't need me to help you put that together in today's life. But it goes so much beyond that, because those plans are they're not going to deal with long-term care. Very few estate plans do, right? We want to, and we're going to talk in a future episode about how we plan in advance for this stuff. If we can just think through what are we going to need when we get the engagement. We hope we don't necessarily need all this stuff. I like to refer to them as the sweaters in the suitcase, right? As we go through this journey of life, I just want to make sure as we're putting a estate plan together that we've thought through and we're prepared. That's the comprehensiveness. Just don't let it get in the way of the simplicity of the plan. The plan should be simple to understand and administer when you're alive and well, the same at incapacity, the same at death. But be prepared. Be comprehensive. Think through, how do we plan for long-term care? How is this going to work? Who's in charge? Make decisions. We'll get into all that.
And I think just introducing the podcast, if you want to kind of explain, what's our thinking behind how we are designing this podcast?
Well, I think it's we want to bring relevant information to the listener that will really help them, because I think when you're educated, when you understand this stuff, it helps you make better decisions of what the best plan is for your family. What are the things that truly matter? As I said, it has as much or more to do with our values and our valuables. What are those values? What is it that we're hoping to accomplish? And I think by educating people on these concepts, who's going to tune in and listen to a podcast because we're talking about dying and disability, incapacity, nursing homes, taxes, fun
exciting
stuff. So who's going to? Well, I find people, they know we need to do this and they want the information to go in. And so it's just trying to equip people to make better decisions about their plan.
Yeah. So before we move forward, so we started the firm 25 years ago. You want to share a little bit about what we have to celebrate our 25th anniversary?
So I do. So yeah, it's kind of a big thing. It's gone by so quickly. It's hard to believe that's been 25 years. But opened up in the bank, and we now have a team. I think there's 18 of us total on the team. If I remember right, there's a lot of us now with 2 offices, but 25 years we're doing estate planning. So we started the firm in the year 2000. So we're having a block party, old-fashioned, turn of the century block party. It was a popular thing, the Y2K kind of party, if you will. And we're going to do that at our Gardner office, where we started at in Gardner, Kansas, and we still have an office there today. And so we're going to have at our Gardner office on July 19th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. A Y2K block party, and it's going to be a lot of fun. There'll be food and DJs face painting and all the things that I think back to how when we had a block party, which were kind of popular back in the day. And it's not just for our clients, but it's for the community. Anybody who listens or subscribes to this podcast and watches this, by all means, come on out. We'll be fun. It's a free event. We're going to have a lot of fun. And so hope to have people there. And that's at our Gardner office at 952 East Lincoln Lane in Gardner. But we've come a long ways in that 25 years. And as I said, we just see estate planning a little bit different, that we don't treat it as a transaction, right? I think that's wrong to do that. And so as part of that, what we did, because if it's not about the documents and how it's different, well, we want to make sure that we're staying in touch with our clients. Our goal, it's one of our core values in our firm, is that we want to be our clients one of the first calls upon their death, serious health diagnosis, incapacity, they win the lottery, whatever the case is. Marriages,
new births in the family, anything exciting.
So our goal is to be that trusted advisor, and we want to be one of the very first calls that come in. And if we treat it as a transaction, and here's your documents, come see if things change. Well, things change all the time. So we implement it very early on, the annual review process. We don't charge for that. I had the mindset that if I charged, people wouldn't take us up on it. And why we don't charge, I tell people we absolutely benefit, because if our clients have future legal needs, they're far more likely to look to us and our firm than the attorney on the street. And we get a lot of referrals from our clients. But the annual review program, we invite our clients to come back in for this free meeting, encourage them, create this cadence of once a year. Not everybody takes us up on it every year, and we're not going to pound on the table, but at least every few years, come in. We're going to confirm all your plan choices. That's part of what we're doing. Here's who you named to make financial decisions. Here's who you named to make healthcare decisions. Here's who you named as beneficiaries. So we want to make sure we're just confirming, is this still appropriate? And then we go through the assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's so important to revisit that every year because, again, we talked about at the beginning, estate planning, it's not just a transaction. It's not just a check on the box and you move on to that. It's something that has to be revisited every year. And I know that you were talking earlier when we were talking about why do we do this? Why do we do annual reviews? And you were sharing a story about my grandfather, and it was so important to them as well. And my grandmother was, she had dementia, and he just found out that he had stomach cancer, and he was passing soon. And it was very important to him. He had just a couple weeks, and he had to revisit his estate plan. It's not something that I think he had been continually revisiting and updating. And so he, that's just something that has to be done. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know how much time you have left. You don't know if, you're going to fall, have a stroke the next day. And so something, you got to be on top of it and reviewing it, making updates when updates happen. And
yeah. And so again, that was one of those things that influenced me because I was just brand new getting started when that occurred. He got the diagnosis and I flew out to visit with him and give him that peace of mind by reviewing everything and letting him know that grandmother was going to be okay. And so we just encourage people, look at this stuff periodically. Make sure that everything's titled properly. Beneficiary designations are in place. And that's what we help our clients do. We also like to do the family meeting where we bring, we want the kids to know mom and dad have a plan. Here's what you need to know about the plan. Here's where we're going to find things. So those are things I think that make us a bit different. And they're things that we encourage people, if you're doing an estate plan, make sure you're looking at this stuff periodically and that things are titled properly.
Yeah.
All right. Anything you have as we kind of wrap up this first part talking about our 25 years? Because I want to move on to some other topics.
No, I don't have anything else to add to that. I think it's covered it well.
So I'd like to kind of move into the second topic we're talking. Why do we plan? What is the purpose of planning? Why are people concerned about this?
And why is this for everybody? And is it for everybody? I think that's a good point. So, yeah.
Okay. And what are your thoughts? What are the things that clients tell you when they come and plan? What are the concerns that they're expressing to you?
Most of the time I don't hear, the concern of I want to be a burden on my children. I think that's not something that most people come in and say. In fact, I've never heard that. But I think the concern is the opposite, right? They don't want to be a burden on their children. They don't want to put things off to the last minute and make the children scramble. We see times where the children are in the middle of life itself and they have young children. They've got jobs. They've got, mom and dad maybe just had a stroke, emergency, and now they're stressed and now they're having to figure out, what did mom have? Where did they keep their assets? They just don't want to be a burden. I think that's the biggest thing that we hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to be a burden. Often that is expressed as I don't want my loved ones to have to go through probate because why? Well, probate's a burden, and we're going to talk some about that. But I don't want to be a burden, number one thing. And closely on its heels, I think at number two is family harmony. They don't want their kids or loved ones arguing and fighting about things. But, at the end of the day, I think people want their assets to go who they want, when they want, the way they want, with the least amount of cost and complexity. They want to make sure that they have a plan for long-term care. We hope we never need long-term care, but if we do, it's expensive. And how do we pay for that? And how do we avoid the government throwing liens on our property and having to go through the Medicaid spin down?
Right.
And again, I think that's one of the things that sets us apart is that I want to make sure that we've thought about that at the outset of the plan. Because when do most people do that planning?
So many people that I meet with, they come in and they're already, husband's health is failing and they're looking at nursing homes right then and there. And they've waited too long and there's less options that we have at that point to do. They're in what I call crisis mode. They're waiting way too long to start planning and thinking about. But they know it's coming. That's the thing. That oftentimes, right, you start to see signs that your health is starting to fail, but it's scary. It's not a fun thing to talk about. It's not a fun thing to go and especially when you're dealing with hospitals and social workers and nursing homes and, you're dealing with all these things. The last thing you want to do is go and meet with an attorney as well. But it's so important. So, right, I have a lot of people that they just wait till the last minute.
Well, as I, say, people, they don't start thinking about this stuff or do anything about it, at least until they're seated at the admissions desk at the nursing home. And then they realize this is expensive and they're panicking, like, how are we going to afford to pay for this? And so if we can get people to think about that earlier when we're still healthy and alive and well. And I tell people, I hope we never need long-term care, but if we do, we can plan in advance. We can have a plan in place. So, and as you said, most of the time we see it coming. So part of that annual review process, confirm plan choices, make sure everything's titled properly, beneficiaries set up, because that part gets out of whack very quickly. But the other thing we're doing, how's your health? How's everybody getting along?
Right.
And I tell clients, you get some serious health diagnosis or start seeing declining health, don't wait till the next annual review to tell us about that. We can always accelerate that meeting. Come in, because the earlier we can catch that, we've built processes into the plan. If we've done that plan in advance, we have to flip some switches, but the earlier we have for that, typically the better off we are. So those are reasons we hear people plan. They don't want the kids fighting. They want their assets to go who they want. They want to protect the home. But I think number one, I don't want to be a burden is the number one thing. And if we don't do the planning, we know that we've blown it. You've left it for somebody else to go figure it out.
Right.
And when they do that, then they're going to end up going into to probate almost certainly, as to and it's going to be a burden for those we leave behind.
We're gonna be in situations, and like you said, with your grandfather, where left it to the caretaker. You've lost the family photo albums, all the important things. That it wasn't about the money, it was about those things, and you've lost that by not planning ahead. So it is very important.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens when we fail to plan. So maybe to set that up, let's talk about probate. What is probate?
Yeah. Why don't you give the different definitions, and make sure to add the funny definition, which is my favorite definition there.
Okay, I can do that. So, if I was to legally define what is probate, probate would be court-supervised administration of an estate. And it really serves three primary functions. Number one, gather up an inventory of the assets. Number two, pay or otherwise settle the creditor claims. So you got to gather up the assets and pay the debts. Number three, distribute out whatever's left to the rightful heirs or beneficiaries. And so that would be the legal definition. But I think what really helps people understand, and this is probate at death, right? We'll get into in future episodes of, probate for guardianships, conservatorships, that kind of thing more live. But probate at death, if we understand its function, it helps us understand it better. And the function of probate at death is to take assets that are now titled to somebody who is deceased, somebody who's died. It's now part of their estate. It's titled in the name of somebody who's deceased, and we're retitling it to the name of somebody who's alive. That's what the function of probate is.
All right, now for my favorite definition.
The funny definition. Well, this is, I think, people who have been through probate with maybe a loved one or something have a far more appreciation of this definition. But I tell people you can think of probate as this. Probate is a lawsuit that you file against yourself after you're dead using your own money for the benefit of your creditors. And for those who've been through probate can say, yeah, there's some truth, absolute truth to that, because it's involving the court, it's expensive, it's time consuming. You're almost certainly going to need an attorney involved to get through this. Very, statute driven, legalistic, if you will. And it's just a burden. It's complex. It takes time to get through.
How long does it take to go through probate?
On average, 1.5 to 2 years to get through. Here in Kansas, we have a 6-month creditor claim period. So, creditors have a full 6 months. So we're not going to finish that before that claim period comes. In Missouri, it's a 1-year claim period. So, but 1.5 to 2 years on average. But we certainly know ones that have taken much longer to go through, especially if there's any kind of conflict that goes on. So it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's going to involve the court going in. And the thing is, it's so easy to avoid if we just plan in advance to come in. But people aren't doing that, and so they're faced to have to go through this probate process.
Right, and I know that we've had a client before where they didn't plan ahead. They ended up going through probate and talk about how expensive that was and what was left for the family and the kids when they didn't get along so well. Mom and dad weren't really clear what would happen and what should happen with their assets. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think whenever we have not created that clarity, we haven't planned, there's a lack of clarity. So we see more fighting and arguing in those probate cases than we do ones where there was a plan, because sometimes even with a plan they end up probate. And we'll talk again in our future episode of how we avoid that. But when we fail to plan, we see more arguing and fighting. In fact, I used to refer to the notice that has to be sent out to all the heirs at law that get notice. I used to refer to that notice as the ticket to the fight, because there's likely to be a fight. So when we send out the notice, it's their ticket to come in, because it's telling them there's going to be a hearing, and it tells them that they can come in with their objections and appear. So there's going to be arguing and fighting. And there's often multiple then attorneys who get involved in these cases. And guess whose assets are paying for all the attorneys as a general rule? And that's, the person who died, right? So the estate, because the courts want everybody to have equal access to justice. It doesn't have to be that way, but most of the time the court's going to have the attorney fees for the various attorneys paid from the estate. And so we're losing a lot of money to that. And we have seen many examples of where this goes on for years. One comes to mind was a case that we got appointed to. This case had been going on, I want to say it was 12 years that this case had been pending. And I don't remember if one of the attorneys who represented someone who was incapacitated, I think she had dementia. She hadn't had when the case first started, but she had developed dementia, and this case had been pending for 12 years. And the attorney, I believe, he retired, but anyhow, they needed a replacement attorney, and so we got appointed by the court, and one of our attorneys in the firm took that case on. It had been pending for 12 years, and unfortunately, they had spent a lot of money fighting over this stuff, and there wasn't a whole lot left anymore by the time they got done with their fight. I mean, there were still assets, but they'd spent a lot. And we were able to help get that case wrapped up and done. But it just was one of those very, very unfortunate situations.
I think if you would have asked her before all that happened, is that something you want to have happen? And are you okay with that? I don't know anybody who would say that's what they want to have happen.
But when we fail to plan, often that's, what happens. We know we're going to probate when we fail to plan. And, it's not just when we fail to plan, it's not just probate at death, right? We also have, if we become incapacitated, there's nobody there because you didn't do any planning. There's nobody there to, make decisions for you. So we're in probate court for guardianships, conservatorships, where somebody's got to be appointed to make those. They got to file annual accountings with the court. So if the idea was, I don't want to be a burden, and we didn't plan, we've blown it. You're going to be a burden. And, even if we don't become incapacitated, we know we're going to probate at death. And so remember, function of probate, take assets, title. So as long as we had any assets, we're going to go to probate at death, that there was absolutely nothing in place. And so we just need to make sure we get the plan in place. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate this stuff. Keep it simple. Be comprehensive. And then communicate this plan to your loved ones so they know what the plan is. In our view, transparency goes a long way of keeping the family peace. Right.
And I think that really sets what we do apart and why it matters. And it matters for really everybody. And even is estate planning, who's estate planning important for? Well, it is everybody. And something I think that most people aren't thinking through, and especially, I'm young, I've got young children, and what happens when they turn age 18? I think most parents would think, my child, they're going off to college, they're going out, living on their own. And if something happens to them, well, one, they're probably not thinking usually something's going to happen to them. I don't know. I haven't been in that situation yet. Maybe you're thinking that my child's a little nuts. We'll see. But, what happens if they get injured in a car accident and they go to the hospital, and, you as a parent, you're calling around, you're trying to figure out where your child is, what's going on, are they okay? What if you've done no planning? The doctors don't have to speak. In fact, they probably won't speak with you. This hospital staff, they can't speak with you. If your child now, age 18, they're an adult, they don't have proper estate planning documents in place, it's going to be a difficult situation.
And we, unfortunately, I've seen that tragic situation unfold several times in my years where, a young adult, I think in both these situations was away for college, And both of them involved accidents. One was a car accident, and the other one was another accident, I think, that occurred. But in the hospital, and the parents, I think the hospital, because, these are people, they want you to know, they were able to give them a little bit of information, but they had to tell them, look, you have no authority to make decisions, and I can't even really discuss this with you because you don't even have HIPAA authorization. So making sure, yes, our kids turn 18 and move on to have that discussion, keep it simple, but at least get those powers of attorneys and a HIPAA authorization in place. The kids have to make the decision that they're going to do it, but often the parents can have some influence, like, hey, kids, let's get it in. And so we like to have those discussions with our clients when their kids turn 18 to just make sure we got a plan in place, deal with it. Most of the time, we never have to act on those, right? And that's certainly the hope. But if we did need them, because, man, is that a stressful situation if you couldn't get any information or make decisions about a child who has got some serious, health issues going on.
Right. That would be very, very difficult. So I know there's a lot of stories out there that people have heard, even in the news, the Terry Shivos, if anybody remembers, I'm sure a lot of people remember that story. Just more stories of people failing to plan. And this is why, this podcast is, I hope, so valuable to people that we're talking about the things that really matter. And, you hear about this happening all the time. If they just had an estate plan in place, they talked about this, they met with an attorney, they did this, we wouldn't be in that situation. Sometimes you're going to be in that situation regardless, but at least you've planned ahead, and you've set yourself up for success.
So you and I were talking about the Terry Shiva because you said you were too young to really remember that and you weren't paying attention. But those my age or older, we remember that very clearly because it brought national attention. So Terry was a young lady down in Florida. She had a heart attack, lost oxygen to the brain. She, they restarted the heart, but she had lost oxygen, and she was in what the doctors declared a permanent vegetative state or persistent vegetative state. And her husband came forward and said Terry had said she would not want to live this way, but she had never done any formal estate planning, had not signed anything. And her husband said Terry would not want to live this way. We need to remove the feeding tubes. And her parents said, no, Terry would want to live. And so the hospital, they kind of threw up their hands and said, well, you guys can't agree. You're going to have to get a court involved. And so the husband went to the probate court there in Florida, the local court, and seeking an order to have the feeding tube removed. And we watched it all play out on national TV, and this spanned over several years, and it brought a lot of national attention to, the need to plan in advance and make a decision. And, if Terry Shiva's goal had been that, she wanted not to be a burden, and she wanted her husband and parents to continue to get together for the holidays and do those together, I think we can confidently say.
They're probably not doing that.
Yeah. Based on what we saw on TV, I can confidently say I think she blew it. I think she was a burden. I mean, this went on for years. Litigation, state court appealed up, federal courts got involved, politicians got involved, the laws got challenged. I mean, there was a lot that came out of this. So I think she blew it. She was a burden, and pretty confident that that family's not getting together for Thanksgiving anymore as it goes on. So it's just having planned in advance to avoid this. Doesn't have to be complicated, but you got to make sure you get this stuff in place because it matters. It truly matters. And if we think this stuff through and we're thinking about how it works when we get to the end game, being comprehensive in the planning, hope we never need that living will, which is the document that would have dealt with the Terry Shiva situation. Making sure think, how does that work? Who's going to be make decisions? Is this the appropriate person? Should there be more? Because we don't have the crystal ball. We don't know what's going on in people's lives when we need this stuff, and we just need to think this stuff through. And in our view, that's what as attorneys that we do, and we make sure we're comprehensive. When we've got the plan for long-term care, we're looking, how do we minimize the impact of taxes? Something else I think most people miss when they're doing their estate plan. They're not really thinking through the tax issues. So, well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of our first episode So we've got it done here. I would encourage listeners, if this is of interest to you, subscribe and share. You'll find us on Apple Podcast, YouTube, as well as Spotify. You can also go to our website at stocktonlaw.com, and you'll find links to the various platforms there. So I hope you will tune in for our episodes as we go forward, and that you find the information we're talking about today and in future podcasts to be relevant and helpful in you figuring out how to leave the legacy that you want to leave, and make sure that you're being comprehensive in your planning. So, all right. So, Sophia, you're going to be joining me in our next episode that we'll go in, and we're going to be talking, I think, in that one, getting more into the whole probate process and what happens when we fail to plan. And if we have time, maybe into the basics of planning, like if we are going to plan, how do we do that? Wills, trust, and we'll get into that.
All right.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. Laws vary by state, and this podcast focuses on estate planning and elder law in Kansas and Missouri. If you are located in Kansas or Missouri and require legal advice, please contact our office. Otherwise, consult a qualified attorney licensed in your jurisdiction.